Anita, how's your mental health?
Questionable at all times. You know this.
Yeah, how's the mental health of your children?
Also a little bit tricky. Can I tell you my experience in trying to find therapists for myself and my kids, Mel?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is how it goes. You ask around your friends and your family for a referral for somebody who's nearby. You finally find somebody who sounds like they might work for your family. You give them a call and you find out that A, they're not accepting new patients, or B, they have a huge wait list. So you start over again and you ask people if they know anybody who would be a good therapist and a good fit. Finally, you find one, you go and you meet with them and you figure out that you don't actually like them that much. But it's been so much work to find somebody who you can go to in your area that you're kind of stuck with them. Well, do you have any ideas for how to get around this?
I do, because guess what? I've actually had some therapists that I have found on my own, which involves what you're saying. Sometimes I remember one time I was like 3 hours in the bathtub on my phone looking
Yeah.
through websites. I was such a prune at the end. But I have also had the experience with working with BetterHelp. And it was like, I don't want to say too good to be true, but because it is true, but it's like amazing because I was matched with my therapist within 24 hours.
And you didn't have to go through all of that other ridiculous process of trying to find somebody. And here's the cool thing too, is if that person didn't work out for you, you can just switch and say, and it's not like you're committing to another years long search for somebody who you're going to jive with.
It's true. And I lucked out, or maybe just BetterHelp is really good at matching people together because I never had to change my therapist. I loved her. Perfect fit for me. And I know that some of our friends have used BetterHelp and they've had to change therapists, and boom, same day, you can change.
Easy peasy.
You can ghost your therapist. Get a new one.
I love this idea. BetterHelp is one of our sponsors. If you use our promo code trybetterhelp.com/WWDN, you get 10% off your first month. And we totally recommend it.
Yes, get some therapy. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN.
Hey, Mel, how's it going? How are you?
Hi, Anita. It's going. I'm having a really hard time with my emotional bandwidth lately.
Tell me more. Why?
First of all, lots going on in the world.
Yeah.
Second of all, dealing with grief.
Yeah.
Third of all, for me, dealing with re-entry into an old situation, but trying to come to terms with the fact that I'm recovering still. I'm just having a hard I'm having a hard enough time being back and trying to figure out my new normal again. And re-grieving a lot of things, plus having people want to know everything that I'm doing and my future plans, and I just can't answer those things. And so it's been really hard for me to just like process anything.
You made it sound like you'd just gotten out of prison. Like, I'm trying to reintegrate back into society.
I kind of did get out of prison.
Is
right?
New York prison? I don't know.
We were on lockdown.
That's true.
Remember.
Okay, that is true. Okay, fair point.
No, I think what it is, it's like, when our husbands died and we wanted to tell everybody everything about it. I feel 100% opposite about all this.
You don't want to talk about it?
People that are not in my normal life, it's hard for me to want to tell them every detail or have them just want to know information when I'm like, I really don't feel like talking about it and I don't have answers. So I'm kind of trying to deal with those things right now. It's hard.
Yeah. And you alluded to the fact that the world, especially, I mean, we're in the United States, right? And we are having craziness right now. There's riots and there's protests and there's just a lot of unrest about race relations in the United States, and I think that spilled over to the world to a certain extent, but it's pretty crazy here right now. So, do you find that you hit a point where you just can't really engage in that because you don't have enough, like you were saying, emotional bandwidth, like you can't engage?
Definitely. I have been probably feeling like a lot of people have, where they're concerned if they say something, it's the wrong thing because they're a white person. And we only have a certain perspective. And I'm concerned that if I don't say anything, that I will get accused of the silence is violence sort of thing. And meanwhile, I'm just trying to like stay alive myself and like not go down the like suicide hole, basically. I probably should have rephrased that differently, but you know what I mean? Yeah.
So I feel you on that. I've really done some thinking about things probably deeper than I have in the past. And actually, grief is a master teacher. And let me tell you why. This perspective that I feel like I've gained. So there are some things that you can't understand until you've experienced them. And losing your spouse, losing your husband is one of those things. So many times people will say to me, I can't imagine what you're going through. How many times have you heard that?
So
like
a million.
10,000? Yeah. People will say, I can't imagine what you're going through. And you know what? The truth is, they are right. They can't imagine it. But sometimes people use that, I feel like, as a way to absolve themselves from trying. They just say, I can't imagine what you're going through. And then they're like, ding, check. I don't have to try because I just told them that I can't imagine, right? And it's kind of a paradox. So it's true that they can't imagine, but they should try, right? And use that to kind of try and understand, knowing that they can't understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree.
And I feel like it's the same thing I feel like with, the Black experience in America. We can't understand because we haven't lived it. And we need to come to terms with the fact that we can't understand, but not absolve ourselves from trying to understand just because we know we can't understand. But try and make ourselves understand to the best of our ability. If that made any sense. That's where I am right now, trying to understand, trying to change my thoughts and trying to figure out a way to reach out and to be better, but knowing that I can't understand fully, but still trying. So that's basically where I am in the whole thing, but also feeling like I hit a limit and I'm like, I just can't take in anymore. The pandemic, this, the economy, all of these things at once, plus just trying to raise my kids and being way in over my head. I mean, way in over my head. So
there was, I'm obviously in the musician community, we owe most of popular music to Black culture, hands down, no argument there. So there's been a lot of talk and a lot of uprise, I guess, in those communities as well. But one thing that I listened to yesterday, that it was an episode of The Murder Squad, and they had this female cop that used to be a cop in LA. I think she's retired now, and she has written a book, and she's a Black woman, and she's amazing. I really enjoyed the interview, and her book is called Black and Blue, and her name is Cheryl Dorsey, and I'm actually going to get her book and read it. But she had some really interesting things to say, and I really enjoyed her perspective. And her perspective is coming from a place of experience and understanding a bunch of sides of different cultures and the police culture and all that. So I'm looking forward to reading that and learning more.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
You'll have to let me know if you like it, if it's worth my time.
Yeah, I will. And I feel
my limited time.
One thing is, as everybody knows, since I talk about it on here, I'm in therapy, and this was one of my concerns that I talked to my therapist about. I just said, I care so much about my friends, my Black friends, my all of my friends, but of course right now, especially my Black friends. And I feel like I want to help them, but I don't know if I'm doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And then I only have so much that I can give. It's like I'm a sponge that's full of water, and every new stressor or thing that's emotional is just like another splash of water dumping on me as a sponge. And it's like, absorb me. And I'm like, I can't. I only have a human body and brain, and I'm about ready to explode.
I'm going to explode.
So, yeah. So we have been working on that, and she had to remind me, she's like, hey, these things that the whole world is dealing with right now are huge issues, and you're also dealing with huge things. You are still in healing. So it's a little bit different while you are in healing and you're at this, you need to be at a stable spot before you jump into anything that's really combative. So that's been kind of good for me to keep in check. Like, okay, Mel, you're still healing. You care about everybody and you want to do the right thing. And it's such a confusing time right now, but you are still healing. Not as a cop-out at all. It just is like so huge to deal with all this stuff plus grief at the same time. I hope that came across in a good way, in a kind way. And I'm so sorry if it did not. I know that there's a lot of misconstruing things. But we really appreciate everybody.
Please don't attack us.
Yeah, please don't attack us. Our heart is in the right place. We're learning. If we do have any listeners that are widows that are a person of color, we would love to hear your experience. So please reach out to us. Or if you know of somebody that would feel comfortable being interviewed on our podcast, please refer them to us. Give them our email, widowwedonow@gmail.com, and we would love to have them as a guest and get their perspective and learn about what things are like for them.
Awesome.
I have decided as well that we are going to invent something new, as we do sometimes on this podcast. I think
Mel just like pulls them out of the air without telling me about it.
It's true. She learns about it in real time.
Okay, let's hear it.
I would like to start something called Widow Wins. Because there's a lot of hard things that we're going through. There's a lot of crazy things in the world right now. And I think it's good that we have something positive or something where we can share little tiny victories. For example, a widow win could be, I got it out of bed today. Or a widow win could be,
I won a race.
Or a widow win could be, I gave Mel and Anita 5 stars on their podcast and I reviewed it. And I said my country's name so that she would play my clarinet. Play the clarinet. So we're going to start it on our Facebook page, and we'll just start a widow win little section. And feel free to comment, and we would love to hear your tiny victories or your big victories.
Yeah, and your tiny victories that are big victories in the same breath. Okay, cool. Okay. Let's do it.
I'm Mel.
I'm Anita. We're a couple of young widows trying to figure out Widow We Do Now. Hey guys! We all know that therapy is an important weapon in our grief arsenals. Maybe you live in a small community with limited mental health resources, or maybe you're living through a global pandemic and can't leave your house. Or maybe you would just rather sit in the bathtub eating nachos instead of driving to and from your counseling appointments. Technology is making it easier than ever to access therapy. We are excited to be partnering with BetterHelp. BetterHelp brings professional counseling to you wherever you are. All you have to do is fill out a questionnaire, and BetterHelp will match you with a therapist suited for your situation. And after a few sessions, if you aren't vibing with your therapist, you can request a new one. BetterHelp does all the legwork. BetterHelp is offering our listeners 10% off their first month if you sign up at trybetterhelp. That's help as in help, my husband died.com/WWDN. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN.
Happy widowing!
Sometimes we assume that unless we had a huge life insurance payout, we don't really need to know anything about investments or even finances. But guess what? A little knowledge of finances is critical for all of us. Maybe your partner was in charge of that stuff, and now you find yourself making all the decisions. Maybe you're mad about that. Maybe I am. Nicole from the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast is here to help. She tackles financial literacy by telling the stories of women and widows and finance experts, and shares the lessons they've learned as certified financial planners. Whether you know a lot and feel confident in your financial decisions or feel unsure about all of that stuff, there is more to learn. Listen and subscribe to the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast on all podcast platforms. This ad was paid for by Rockhouse Financial, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
This next guest is actually our old friend from like a month ago because we've already done this interview, but we had technological problems. So we're back with Karen from Canada. And all you folks that are in the Widow Wives Club can thank her because it's because of her that we started it. So welcome, Karen.
Hi, Karen.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me again.
Sorry, technology sucks.
I'm going to blame it on my 18-year-old son hogging the Wi-Fi.
I don't think it has anything to do with that, but we'll go with that because he can't defend himself.
That's right.
Yes. So Karen is from Canada. Karen, where in Canada are you joining us from?
I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is kind of in the absolute dead center of North America. And it is about 3 hours north of Fargo, North Dakota. So if everyone watched that crazy Fargo movie about all the local yokels, I'm even farther in the boonies than that.
That makes me cold just thinking about it.
Well, it's not cold today. So this is our, so it's almost summer here. And it's actually probably about 75 degrees Fahrenheit outside today. So that's pretty
That sounds lovely.
Yeah. Ooh. So is summer in Canada basically just the month of July and then it's over?
I'd say kind of June, July, and August, and then it's over. Okay. Fall is like really, well, where we live, fall is really short. Like it's like September rolls around, the leaves turn yellow, and then they're gone.
And then everything dies.
And everything dies.
This is so cold.
Our Thanksgiving is the second week in October, and usually by then, like, there's no leaves on the trees.
What is your favorite Canadian candy bar?
Oh, you know what?
There are a lot.
I don't really eat candy bars, but I love poutine.
Look at what I brought to our interview. I have licorice on hand.
Oh, okay. I like candies, but I don't like chocolate bars.
Oh.
I know it's weird.
That's weird.
I like dark chocolate.
That's good.
So crazy about
that counts.
Sweet candy bars. But a good package of nibs, those are pretty good. I like those. But I don't think they're Canadian.
I don't think so either.
No,
but that's okay.
So. They do sell them in Canada.
So Karen, you have an incredible husband that passed away and an incredible story of when he passed away, and we would love for you to share that. So can we just start a little bit by having you talk about your husband, how you met, what his life was like, and then about your life together?
Sure. Well, maybe I'll start off with how we met. I was in university, and I went to school here in Winnipeg, where I live, and I had a summer job, and I was working at the Liquor Control Commission in the accounting department. It was a summer job. Liquor is highly regulated in Canada, so I was in this big head office doing a clerical job, and I met this guy, and his name was Ed from pricing, and he was just this super engaging.
Ed from pricing.
Ed from pricing.
That's the best title.
Like his real name was Eduardo, but at that time I didn't know that. But yeah, so he's Ed from pricing, and he's from Chile, and he has a heavy Spanish accent. And when I met him, he charmed the pants off of me. I was 19 and he was 36 years old. So I was kind of confused about this friendship I had with him. You know, we'd have lunch together and coffee breaks, and because it was a government office, so you had to take your coffee breaks and you had to take your lunch breaks. So I got to know him through the summer and was a little bit confused about my feelings toward him, and went back to university in September. And this is back in the olden days where there was no internet, no cell phones, none of that kind of stuff. So keeping in touch with people wasn't as easy. And I went back to school and kind of tried to forget about him because he was 16 years older than me. Like, this is crazy, right? I'm 19 and he's 36. He had 2 kids that lived with their mom in a small town in northern Manitoba. He was a runner. He was like a political activist. He'd come from Chile and was in prison in Chile as a political activist in the 1970s. Was suffered under a lot of under the dictatorship down there. Was in prison for 2 years. Was tortured. And came to Canada through an asylum program with the Prime Minister at that time, Justin Trudeau's father. Fun fact.
I did not know that.
Well, now you do.
I do. I know 100% more about Canada than I did before we started.
Canada's pretty cool. Anyway, so I went back to school thinking, you know what, I'm going to forget about this guy because that was just, one of those attractions, and I'm just going to move on. And my birthday came along in February, and I received this bouquet of flowers with like a poem attached to it, and it was from Ed from Pricing, and that was sort of it. I mean, I think that at that point I realized I don't think I'm going to forget about this guy. This is just don't think it's going to happen. And the next summer, I went back to work at the same summer job, and we started dating, and we were married 2 years later. And we got married at a small wedding in my mom and dad's backyard. But his life was just so engaging and so different from mine. He was a big runner, and he used to run a lot of marathons. And at that time, I liked running, but I was more into other sports when I was in high school. But I started running a bit more in university because I didn't get recruited to the university basketball team. I'm 5'4". I don't know why, but anyway. So I would go running with him, and he started making training programs for me. And then I got recruited to run cross country for the university cross country team. They had a really bad team, so that's why I got recruited. They needed that fifth runner really badly. And so he started developing training programs for me. And in the middle of all this, we got married and bought a house, and I was in university. I was taking business school at the time. And then he started really liking coaching. And so then he started to coach other athletes. He took all the coaching courses, and then he became like a fixture on the University of Manitoba track and field coaching team. And he won Coach of the Year from Athletics Manitoba one year. That was after I graduated because I was not on that award-winning team.
Is that why they were award-winning?
They might have been better when I left. Yes, that is possible. But I like to think that I was a bit of his training guinea pig. He didn't, he learned on me. So all those other athletes were better because of me. I kind of took one for the team. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Yeah. So then I went to law school, and so I was in university for a while, and he was coaching, and he was working, and I was working. And then along the way, he got turned down for a promotion at work, and this kind of didn't sit well with him. And at the time, I think I mentioned that liquor sales are highly regulated in Canada. Where we are, they were doing a proposal for private wine store licenses. And he came home one day and said, "What do you think about opening a private wine store?" And I'm like, you know about wine, but what do you know about business? I mean, I'm a lawyer. I'm like, I get paid to worry for people. That's what I did for a living. So I'm just worried. Well, you don't know what you're doing. This is impossible. How can we possibly do this? Well, he convinced me, and he was very good at that, of getting me out of my comfort zone and helping me to take chances and take risks. And anyway, we opened up this wine store, and that was his baby. And he's been running it for 20 years. And, our life ticked along. We had a wonderful life. He was such an influence on so many people, especially former athletes that used to run under his team. He hired a lot of them. Our manager at the store is someone that was a track runner when I was back in university that's been working for us forever. So he's created, whole futures for a lot of people, not only for his family, but for his employees and for all the athletes that he coached. He's been a big mentor to a lot of people. So fast forward, we have 2 kids. And we, like I said, we had a wonderful life together. My kids played hockey and soccer. He coached my son's soccer team. Never missed a hockey game. Always stood at the side of the rink wearing shorts in the middle of winter when it's I was with my parka and my Sorels and my hot shots in my mitts. And he'd be standing there at the side of the rink in his shorts, and he was kind of like a trademark of his. But yes, we had a wonderful life together. We have a cottage out on a lake here. We've been, financially very fortunate, and we have a condo in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, that we would go down to every year with the kids at Christmas. My parents are down there, and we'd visit them. And that's when the story kind of takes a little bit of a turned for the worse. Christmas this past year, we were down in Mexico as usual, and we're there with the kids and enjoying our typical Mexico time. But my husband's health over the last few years had gone downhill. He had diabetes and he had some underlying health conditions, and his health wasn't great. His feet were a big problem, and his heart wasn't in good shape. So he was definitely not the epitome of a healthy guy. Didn't do a lot of going to doctors over the years. A little bit towards the end, he started to go more, but I believe some of the experience he had in Chile in prison, and he was very, very sick when he was detained in prison and tortured. And so I think he had a bit of a distrust for kind of the medical system. And so for a lot of years, he never went to see doctors. Anyway, so he wasn't super healthy, but I wasn't expecting what happened to happen. So we were there at Christmas with our kids. They went home on January 1st. And then the two of us spent the next 2 weeks together. I was a bit nervous because my kids they were 19 and 17 at the time, and my son is still in high school. So them being home alone is a little stressful. So I stayed for 2 weeks with him, and I came home on January 15th, and he was going to stay another 2 weeks and come home on February 1st because my birthday was February 4th and I was turning 50. So he was coming home for before that. So I came home on the 15th of January, get back into my life with the kids here, just organizing stuff and managing our life. And almost 2 weeks later, he wasn't feeling well. And he was in Mexico, and I was communicating with him on FaceTime and texts and stuff like that. And I remember on the morning of January 26th, I'd heard the news that Kobe Bryant died. And I remember texting him, "Oh my God, that's so sad. Kobe Bryant died. There was this helicopter crash, and there were all these people and family on that helicopter, and it was just so tragic." And he wasn't feeling well because he wasn't even really answering me like he normally would. And I called him in the early evening and FaceTime, and he didn't look good. Like he didn't look well. This had happened before with him. Like he'd had bouts of when he didn't feel well. I think often it was blood sugar issues, and he'd get kind of dizzy, and he often needed to sleep, but his back was bothering him, and he was having trouble moving and wasn't feeling well. We had some friends that had been staying with him at the condo, and they were concerned about him, and they had texted me and said, "We're kind of worried about him." So we were trying to talk him into going to the hospital. "Why don't you go in and see a doctor, just get checked out and make sure everything's okay?" And he was pretty stubborn, and he didn't want to go. He didn't want to go to the doctor, and I was pretty worried. But like I said, this had happened before, and I had spent a lot of time the last few years kind of worrying about him because his health wasn't good, and I was worried. I'd had lots of talks with my kids about it, saying, Dad's not super healthy. We don't know how long he's going to be around. Let's make sure we enjoy our time with him. And I think we definitely did that in the last few years. So that evening, I was worried about him. I talked to the kids a little bit at home, saying, I'm a little worried about Dad tonight. And my son actually sent him a text saying, "Hey, I love you, Dad. Hope you're okay. Can't wait for you to get home." He didn't get an answer to that text. And before I went to bed, I think it was around 11, I texted him again saying, "Hey, can you just let me know you're okay? I'm going to bed now. Just text me when you're awake." Because I thought if he wakes up, he'll get the text. He'll let me know. Because that's what had happened before. If he'd been alone somewhere and I was worried, I'd say, "Hey, just let me know you're okay." And usually a few hours later, I might fall asleep and wake up and get the text going, "Yeah, I'm fine. Stop bugging me." Something like that, which is usually how that ended. But I woke up around 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and I looked at my phone and he hadn't answered me. So I was really worried at this point because my thoughts were that something was wrong, because he normally would have at least checked his phone and answered me. And so I started phoning. I phoned his cell phone. I phoned the landline. I phoned several times and there was no answer. And so eventually I called my mom and dad, who live in Puerto Vallarta. They live about half an hour away. And I told them that I was worried about him. And they got up and got in the car and drove over to check on him. By now it's about 7 in the morning. And then I was just waiting to hear back from them. I had a very bad feeling about it, but you still like, you just really can't imagine it. So you have hope, and you just like, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. That's what you sort of tell yourself. It's going to be fine. I'm sure it's nothing. It's probably his phone's dead, or, you just kind of go through all these, explanations in your head as to what this, the reason why he hasn't answered me. And then eventually my mom called me back, and it was longer than I thought it should have been, because I know how far away they live. And when she said, well, we're leaving in the next 5 minutes, I was kind of like, they should have called back by now, because it's now about 45, 50 minutes and would only really take them probably half an hour to get there. And she called me back, and she said, Karen, he's gone. He collapsed on the bathroom floor, and he's gone. And I said, are you sure? To my mom. And she said, well, I'm pretty sure. She said to me, in hindsight, I think she probably should have said she was sure, but she said she was pretty sure.
It's like, well, go check again.
Well, that's kind of what I said. I said, well, call someone, get someone there and check again. And, because I didn't really feel that she was equipped to make that assessment, although she probably was equipped to make that assessment. But in my head back here in Winnipeg, I didn't think she was. So
it's not like there's a lot of gray area, like either you're alive or you're dead. There's not a lot of like.
No, but when you're in shock, you don't think 100% straight.
That's funny.
So I was a little hysterical. I'm like, oh my God, no. And I'm kind of yelling in the phone, and my daughter heard me and came downstairs. And then we sat together, and we're both crying, and you're just in disbelief. Like there's just this total shock that you go through, that you're like, no, it can't be true. It can't be true. And maybe she's wrong. Because she wasn't sure. Like I said, in hindsight, I don't know that was the most logical decision to believe that. But anyway, a little bit of time goes by, and then eventually my daughter and I went upstairs and woke up my son, and woke him up and told him that we're just waiting for grandma to call back. But it, this is what it looks like has happened. And she called back, and then there was all sorts of questions for me that you don't expect, or you just honestly can't imagine what it's like to have to answer these questions. I know you guys can, because you've been through this, but what do you want us to do with the body? Do you want to get an autopsy? Do you want it to be embalmed? And what, like, these are all questions that I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm in shock. And when are you coming? And these are the things they're asking me. And I'm like, I can't even answer these questions. And so, they sort of left me with some questions, and then I started to notify people here, and I contacted my husband's daughters, and then I contacted my cousin who lives here, who I'm quite close with, him and his wife, and my sister who lives in Vancouver. I actually don't even remember, making those phone calls, but I think those are the only 3 calls that I made. I think I also called a couple that was staying with him. They were pretty distraught because they were there and knew how sick he was. And so those are the people that I spoke with. And I think at that point, then it was just sort of waiting for someone to come over. And my cousin came first, and they were really great to help me sort of sort through what I needed to do. And I'm like, I have to figure all this stuff out. And so I think the next few hours I spent on the phone between my mom and dad and my cousin and airlines, and trying to figure out what to do. And so I made the decision that I go back. This is now Monday midday now. It's a Monday. I said, I don't think I can go tomorrow. I just didn't think I could pull myself together to fly the next day. And it's also hard to find flights because Winnipeg's not a hub. So I booked a flight for Wednesday, and my Tico's daughter's his younger daughter, Paz Andrea, said she'd come with me. She's like your age. She's like 37 or something like that. So she came with me. We flew back to Mexico, and my sister flew in from Vancouver to stay with my kids. And so I felt good about that, because I had them. I was very, I didn't want them to be here without support, even though they're adults. Their dad just died. And so we flew back to Mexico. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life, was get on that plane. And there was no direct flight, so I had to fly to Vancouver. So it was a 3-hour flight to Vancouver, and then another 5-hour flight down to Puerto Vallarta. And by the time we got down there, I mean, like, of course I haven't slept like at all. So now it's been 2 days of like no sleep. And we get down there, and my parents picked us up at the airport. I'll just say, like, I don't know what I would have done if my mom and dad like didn't live there and weren't there. I just can't even imagine, because they sorted through finding a funeral home and helping me make decisions about what to do. And they really took care of all of that for me. And so when we got there, we went back to the condo, which was really difficult, because that's where it had happened. Kind of dropped off our stuff. A cleaning lady had come in and sort of put all this stuff away, so it wasn't like his stuff was all over the place. She'd kind of put it off into a corner, and then we had to go to the funeral home. And so we get in the car and drive to the funeral home. And I remember looking at my phone. I mean, after being on a plane for 8 hours, and this time, I probably had like thousands of emails and texts and stuff, and I'm just sort of kind of glancing through stuff. And one of them I opened because it was a friend of mine who had a relative who owned a funeral home here, who was giving me some sort of advice about going back to Mexico to deal with this. And the note said, if you're transporting cremated remains, which I already knew I was going to be doing, that we'd have them cremated, make sure that you have, don't get a stone or a metal urn. Ask for a shipping container so you don't have any issues at the airport. And I read this and I'm like, okay. So anyway, we get to the funeral home, and the funeral director's name is Miguel. I'll never forget that. And he sat us down and did not speak English very well. And between my stepdaughter's broken Spanish, like her Spanish isn't too bad, and my mom speaks a bit of Spanish. Mine's pretty terrible. But between us, we sort of were able to kind of figure out what's going on and what we need to do. And he handed me some forms. And the first form is like an application for a death certificate. We weren't even able to put the obituary in the newspaper in Winnipeg, because they wouldn't allow you to do it without like a funeral director notice or a death certificate, because I guess they don't want you publishing obituaries for people that are still alive. So I understand why they have those rules. But we still have, it's now been 2 days and we still don't have a notice in the paper. So we get there and he shows me this form, and I look at it and his name is spelled wrong and his nationality is wrong. And so I'm a lawyer by trade. And so I'm looking at this and I'm kind of freaking out, going, well, what's going to happen if this stuff is wrong? And I go back and I know what I have to do at home to deal with the estate stuff. And what am I going to do if this is wrong? And so we point out the mistakes. And I'll be honest, I don't really understand how you can't just copy it from the passport. So nationality, Canadian. Birthplace, Chile, not the same.
That's too easy.
It's pretty easy, yeah. Anyway, so this is all on like handwritten forms. None of it's online. None of it's in a computer. It's like a form with like the carbon copies underneath that goes like pretty old school. And so he tells me, oh, I'll change it, but he couldn't change it right then and there, because apparently the doctor had to sign off on it, or there was some sort of complication that it couldn't be changed right then and there. So I couldn't see the changes, but he was going to change it. And then we were going to tomorrow, the next day, we were going to go, and he told us we're going to meet at the Canadian consulate, and then we're going to go, and then I would sign something so he could just go and do everything else, and he would get the death certificate and get everything, and then he'd get shipped off to Peak, because there's no crematorium in Puerto Vallarta. So it was like a few hour drive to go and do that, and it could all come back and be back by Friday, and I'm leaving to get on a plane on Saturday. And so this is how this is all going to play out. And I'm like, okay. So we get back to the condo and super exhausted, sleep for 2 hours, then wake up and watch the Australian Open tennis because it's on in the middle of the night, which was very handy for me because I wasn't sleeping. So I did watch Dominique Thiem win that thing.
Yeah.
We did. That was pretty cool. So the next day we go to the consulate, and when I get there, that was a whole sort of ordeal going in. They had very high security there, and they had the air conditioning down to, I don't know, 2 degrees. It was like an ice box in there.
They have to do that because they have to remind you that it's the Canadian consulate, so it can't be any comfortable temperature.
That's what I think.
Tico would have been fine. He would have been in his shorts.
It would have been fine in his shorts because it was just like at the hockey rink. It would have been perfectly fine. So there was a lot of waiting there, and the funeral director is talking in Spanish up at this, it's sort of like this glass cased area. It's very, very high security at the consulate. I've never been to one before. Then eventually the lady that works at the consulate calls me over, and she tells me that we didn't need to go to the consulate, which I actually already knew because I remembered that I called them when I was in Canada, and they said I didn't need to, but I didn't remember it till then. And I'm like, okay. And so she told us, you guys need to go down to City Hall. You couldn't sign some power of attorney so that he could do all this. I have to go and sign this stuff. And don't worry, you can take the remains on the plane on your carry-on bag. You don't need to notify the airline. And by the way, Miguel has never done this before, she tells me. And I'm like, okay. So then you just get a little bit more concerned about the process that he had told us. This is all fine. Don't worry. And now I'm kind of worrying. So we finish up in there, and we're going to go to City Hall, and my parents are exhausted. They had been dealing with this all week. They both weren't even, like, they were both sick and not feeling well. And so I said to them, I said, look, you guys go home. You don't need to, I don't need you. Like, I have to sign all this stuff. There's no reason that you guys need to come. You go home. We'll go with Miguel, and we'll do this. So I'm there with Paz Andrea, with Tico's daughter. And so we're waiting outside, and Miguel says, I'm just going to call for my ride. And so he calls for the car to come around, and up pulls this hearse. And I'm like, oh, okay, so we're going to ride in a hearse. Well, that's interesting. All right. So we get in the back seat of the hearse. And at this point, you got to kind of laugh a little bit about some of this because it all just seems a little crazy. And I remember we're sitting in the hearse, and me and Paz are sitting there. And then I looked behind me, and there's like a coffin in the back of the hearse. And I'm like, oh my God, there's a coffin back there. And I go, Paz, look behind us. And she looks back and she goes, well, it's not that big. It couldn't have been Dad. She says, because Tico was a little large. And so, and that was actually a nice little sort of ice-breaking moment for both of us to kind of get through this crazy day. And then I'll maybe shorten the rest of this because it actually is kind of long. But so we go down to City Hall, we wait there for a while, find out we have to go back somewhere else. So we get back in the hearse, drive back to this other place, wait there for a while. Then we sign some more documents, then get back in the hearse and go back to City Hall. And eventually, after this back and forth thing happened about 3 times, they're ready with the death certificates. And so they call me into the back, and she's now showing me like the proof of the document that they're going to print all these 1,000 copies that I've asked for. And she shows it to me, and I look at it, and they have fixed those mistakes that I'd saw before, but I noticed on the form that it said that the location of where he died was apartment B906, and our apartment is B904. And so I just said, oh, well, this is wrong. It's 904. It's not 906. And Miguel goes, no, it's 906. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
No, it's not. And then they're talking to each other in Spanish for about, 5 minutes. And eventually he looks at me and goes, we can't change that because that's the certificate that the doctor signed, and we can't change it now because the doctor signed this, and we're not going to get our death certificate if we change this. And so I'm like,
they're like, lady, shut up. Just take the death certificate and go back to Canada.
Go with it.
Exactly. Give me like 1,000 copies of this death certificate and I'm leaving. But the good news now, though, is if I go to sell my condo, I can tell people that nobody died in this condo because they died next door in B906. No one died in B904. There's no record of that anywhere in Mexico. So that's good to know. So anyway, all this happens, and we get back, and just exhausted. I think it's now like 4:00 by the time we get back to the condo, and the rest of this is all a bit of a blur. And we visited with some people, some friends that were down there that we knew, and had a few little kind of mini celebrations of him, a couple of toasts and some dinners, of course, that I didn't eat and I just sat and looked at. And then again, tried to go to sleep, slept for 2 hours, woke up in a panic that next night because it just reminded me about the urn. And I'm like, I never said anything to the guy about not getting a stone or a metal urn. And actually, I didn't even really pay attention to the urn that was selected. And now I remember that it was stone and I wasn't paying attention at the time and we didn't clue on us that this was the wrong kind of urn. And so I'm in a total panic. So I get up, get on the computer, and I'm starting to Google, Government of Canada, airlines, cremated remains, and everything I see says, make sure that when you take your cremated remains, you take them in a wooden or a shipping container and do not transport them in a metal or a stone urn because you may not be able to get through security at the airport. And so now I'm like in a panic and I'm just like, what am I going to do? So I've got the tennis on TV waiting for my mom to wake up so I can call her because it's like 4 a.m. And eventually it's like 7 o'clock. I'm like, yeah, that's late enough to call my mom. And so I emailed her and I called her and she's like, okay, yeah, we'll call McGill. We'll see what we can do. And she calls him and takes care of all that. And yep, they have one wooden urn left that they can switch up for me. So I'm like, oh, okay, big sigh of relief. And
I was waiting for you to say that they didn't have one, and so you had to use like a Ziploc bag.
That was like my plan F. I think was that one. Yeah.
Why? Oh, not why. No, I was just out loud thinking, why can't you use a metal or?
Okay, so here's why. I know this now. Because it has to go, so you're not putting it underneath the plane, like it's not going with your checked bags. I'm taking it as a carry-on.
Yeah.
And it's got to go through that scanner, that they scan your carry-on bags. And so if it's stone or metal, they might not be able to see what's inside.
Oh, okay.
So they
don't want to open it.
And they don't want to open it.
And like dig through it to make sure there's not a weapon in it.
But I guess somebody could get an urn with a bunch of ashes and put who knows what in that urn. So that,
I was thinking of using that plan, but I guess they've already thought of that.
Yeah, they've already thought of that. So don't bother.
I have a question about cremated remains. Do they deposit them in the urn or do they put them in a plastic bag and then the plastic bag in the urn?
I have not opened the urn, so I actually don't know how the ashes. It's sitting on my it's sitting in my dining room. And it is this kind of tacky Mexican wooden box that I actually, I never picked it out. And so when I was listening to your podcast about choosing the headstones and stuff like that, it kind of made me giggle because I'm like, well, I just had like zero decision making in that whatsoever.
That might be better.
No, this is your option. Your only option.
I know I've only cremated my pets, but I know that their remains are in a plastic bag and then the plastic bag is in the container. So I'm wondering if they do that for.
Well, you know what? When if I decide to open up, I'll let you know.
Let us know and we'll have you back on and you can tell everyone.
I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do with the urn, with the remains. That's a decision that hasn't been made yet.
Hey, Karen, I can't help but think that you missed an amazing opportunity. And by the way, I think we need to back up and tell everybody that Eduardo's nickname was Tico because Ed in pricing is the same person as Tico, but that was just his nickname. So anyway, we knew that.
Yes, and that's what everyone calls. So if I would back up, I would say that first year when we started dating and I was calling him Ed, he told me, he goes, everybody else calls me Tico. And I'm like, okay.
So Tico it is. Well, it is. You missed a great opportunity for like a soap opera situation because if you hadn't fixed the death certificate, then you could have pretended that Tico was still alive and you could have like engineered some sort of really nefarious, I don't know what. I know. Something.
It could be like, how the lady that was supposedly the oldest woman on earth and died at 116 from France.
Yeah.
How they investigated it and it turned out her mother died, but she took her mother's identity.
You see movies about that, identities.
Yeah. Or
I'm sure you could figure it out, Karen. You're a lawyer.
But I kind of feel like you missed the opportunity because you tried to get his death certificate fixed. There was a lady that lives by us. Actually, there wasn't. She's not alive, but
is dead by
No,
us?
no. Okay. Actually, yeah. So she died. And when her family went to her house, they found, I think it was her husband, frozen in her freezer. And
Oh, that's
yes,
right.
and she had done that so she could keep collecting either his social security
So I have a funny story about
or his
that.
military benefits. So you could have done something like that.
Yesterday in the mail, I have to tell you this. So I don't know what kind of benefits that you guys have floating around in the United States with this pandemic stuff.
They're just floating around and you just grab them.
Grab them.
Well, there's a lot of different ones in Canada. There's some federal ones, and then our provincial, like all the politicians are trying to get everyone to vote for them again. So they're trying to do things for the right groups to help them out. And our premier of Manitoba announced a couple of weeks ago that he was going to give a $200 check to all seniors in Manitoba. And my husband was 66 when he died in January. I got a check in the mail from her, $200 yesterday. And I'm like, do I cash it?
Oh.
What do I do with it?
Yes. Yay.
I'm like,
That's going on here too, that kind of thing. It's all over the
That's
message
like, well-
boards and the Facebook groups. Like, what do I do with this money that they sent me that's for my dead husband? Should I cash it? Should I not?
It's not a lot of money, so it's not a big deal. But I'm like, what do I do with this $200 check? I think I'm just going to cash it.
I think you have earned it for becoming a widow.
And
I can donate it somewhere, and then it's a wash for tax purposes, right?
if they come back and get mad at you, say Mel from America told me I earned it. So Mel from the U.S. said so. So
I'll take responsibility for you.
I'm a widow. Leave me alone.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. I will bite you and it will hurt.
So, Karen, it sounds like the process of getting Tico situated and brought back home was a disaster and a nightmare. And the moral of the story is don't die outside of your country. But you did it, and you got it all sorted out, right?
We did. And yeah, there was one little incident where Miguel actually showed up at the airport just before we went through security and swapped out some papers again. But I will tell you, I never want to see Miguel again in my life.
Hopefully not.
But my parents, they live down there for 6 months, and they're older. They're, my dad's 82, my mom will be 80 this year, and they live down there half the year. And they kept telling me the whole way along, they're going, "This is just practice for us, Karen." And I'm like, "Oh, you just die in Canada, please."
Yeah. Seriously.
I have a question, Karen. So because Tico was 16 years older than you, and because you're a lawyer and you're worried about other people's things, had you guys discussed end of life plans for him? Because of the age difference and because, you're smart. I mean, we didn't, because we're not smart, but
well, you're also
you are.
way younger too. I'll throw that out there. But
Thanks.
No, yeah, I wouldn't say we ever had any sort of deep, meaningful, oh my God, we need to talk about this kind of conversation. But I think, we were married for over 27 years. And I think when you're married that long, these things do come up in conversation, just I think on a more, if you're at a funeral or something for someone else, you might say, oh, this is what I want. So I wouldn't say we ever had a specific conversation about what he wanted, except for one small thing. But he always said he wanted a party. He said, I don't want a stuffy funeral. When I die, I want people to celebrate and I want a party. And so that's what we did. We had a big giant party with 500 people. It wasn't at all religious. There was wine and there was all his favorite food. And it was just as expensive as a wedding. Is what it was.
And you could provide all the wine, though.
I've told my kids, I would like a party, but it could be a less fancy party.
I think that you're onto something. I think that the reason that as we get older, we figure out more end of life stuff is because you've gone to more funerals for friends and associates. Like, I honestly think that that's the springboard for many of those conversations. And so if you're young and you don't go to that many funerals, then, you don't talk about it that much.
Yeah, and you probably didn't have a When I Die folder before all this, but you probably do now. And you probably have all your passwords listed somewhere for someone because you know how horrible that is, right?
Yes, I do.
Me too.
Yeah. Yes. And everybody else who's listening, should have one of those also.
Yes. I call it my When I Die folder.
My dad has one, and he's talked about it for years. and his is called the "When I Get Hit by a Bus" folder.
Oh, well,
That's a good.
like,
That's
okay.
a good. I thought when you said that, I thought you was not "when I die," but one I like ogre like Cyclops, and I was like, "What's when I die?" Anyway,
so there was one thing though that he specifically told me that is a little bit sad. It was during those last 2 weeks when I was in Mexico with him, and we had a really nice time together. And it was actually one of the few times in a long time that was just the two of us together. Because when you have kids and you got a busy life, and you don't get a lot of those times, just the two of you. And we were driving out for dinner. It was a day or two before I came home, and he said to me, "There's 2 songs that I want you to play at my funeral," and he listed them for me, and I was like, "You planning on dying soon?" I wasn't thinking that, like I said, he wasn't super healthy. I don't think he was going to live to be 90, but I certainly thought he'd live for a couple of years at least, like 5. I was thinking maybe 10. I just sort of had this number in my head.
Not 2 weeks.
Another graduation, couple of weddings, and we're good, but yeah, so he told me that, and I did actually, I wrote them down. I recorded them on my phone, and then we did play them at his celebration.
what were they?
One of them was "Send in the Clowns," which is a song that I play on the piano.
Okay.
Super sad.
Yeah.
That is a sad
I know that
It's
song.
actually the only song I could play on the piano without the music. I shouldn't admit that to you, Mel.
Yes, I'm going to rope you in our musical challenges with Anita if you admit to me what you can or cannot play.
I can't play "Send in the Clowns." I can play that one. But my piano is a little out of tune, so it doesn't sound that good.
It's like makes it even sadder.
Yeah.
It's sadder
even
when you
more
hit that
morose.
that one note. You know those notes.
That's funny.
And the other one was the "Trapeze Swinger." It's like 9 minutes long.
I don't know that one.
What is that song?
It's super long. It's also very sad. You should listen to it.
He's got like a circus. He had like a circus theme for his funeral.
Yeah.
He did.
Did you guys have clowns
then
at the
party.
funeral and a trapeze?
And then we also played
Sounded
a
cool.
Spanish song that he had taught me when before we had kids, like when we were first married. He taught me this song in Spanish called "Guerrero del Amor." It means warrior of love. And I sang it at the Amnesty International fundraiser. I am not a singer, so I'm just like, I can't believe I did that. Things you do when you're young and in love.
That's amazing.
We need an Instagram concert or something with you and Anita. You
Why
could
do-
sing,
why do I
play
have to do
piano.
all of these things?
I will say, I think I
'Cause I'm
sound
tired
better
of
on the
playing
piano
music.
than you do on the. I did see some clarinet video posted somewhere. I can't remember where you posted it, but it was.
Yeah.
I played the saxophone in high school, and it sounded very similar to your clarinet playing. But I've gotten rid of the saxophone, so I don't even have it anymore.
Oh,
so.
that's too bad. That's too
No,
bad.
no, it's not.
So, Karen, what does life look like for you now? It only has been, what,
4 months.
5-ish months?
It's been 4 months. Well, one of the things that you alluded to earlier, Mel, I think, was that last weekend in our local newspaper, an article was written, a tribute on my husband, Tico. And it was like a full page. It was a whole page of newspaper. And I did that interview probably a couple of weeks ago with the reporter. And it was a really therapeutic thing for me to do, because I think I've struggled, especially with this pandemic and sort of being stuck without support, of trying to go back to the happy stuff, and instead just thinking about how much he suffered in the last few years, and the sort of all the what ifs and all the sad part. And I've been getting quite angry at life because I have to run this wine store now by myself, and he's not here, and there's all sorts, and there's a pandemic, and our sales are down, and it's just like it's been a pretty negative time in my life in terms of just like getting up in the morning and being able to, like, I never used to understand when people said, "I don't want to get out of bed in the morning." I would always like, well, sometimes I don't want to get out of bed because I'm tired and I want to sleep, but I never felt like fully rested and lying there and just not wanting to get up. And that's how I've been feeling, is just like, I'm lying there going, oh, this stupid life. Like, ugh, I don't want to do this day. And so what I've been doing is I've been listening to podcasts, because they've been like super helpful. to me because I couldn't
Yay.
see anybody. So I go out for walks, and it got me out of the house and got me exercising and go for runs. And that's how I discovered you guys, was just looking for widow and grief podcasts. And I went through a few that I really didn't like at all. But I liked yours. And so that's why I reached out to you, because
Thank you.
you guys helped me, because to me, listening to other people's stories of going through something similar provides a lot of comfort. It just really does. And I don't really know why, but it does. But anyway, this article was written, and when it was published in the paper, I probably got, similar to right when Tico passed away, I got all sorts of texts and emails and comments on the article. And it was really heartwarming, because when you get all those in that first week, and people say, oh, I have this wonderful memory, you can't even process it because you're so shocked and grief stricken. But this has been 4 months now, and I was actually able to really kind of appreciate the love and the comments and the support that I couldn't, a few months ago. So that was really nice.
It's nice to have things written down too, because at least that's what I've noticed. Like what somebody did at Scott's funeral, one of my friends, she had a stack of paper out on some tables and just said, hey, if you have a memory of Scott, please write a note so that we can give it to Mel. And then what my friend did is she mailed them to me, like strategically, I guess,
really?
so that I would continually get these notes. And it was so nice because, I mean, you guys know this, like Scott and I were not married for very long. And so there's a whole life that I was waiting to like learn about, like, to continue to get to know him. And so because he died and I couldn't hear it from him, it was so nice to hear from the other people that were with him, like even before I knew him. So yeah. And isn't that so weird that your brain just can't even absorb any information for a while?
I think at some point I'll go back and read the box full of cards.
Yeah.
Did you guys go back and read through them? The sympathy cards?
I have read through this. I read through the box of sympathy cards. We got a folder, all of Jason's students, or everybody at the school, they allowed them to write little 3x5 cards with memories and things like that. And it was so funny because we were sitting around reading. I was reading through them when they first came. And I said, what I've learned is that, and Jason taught English, what I've learned is that Jason was not a very good teacher because they were, the spelling was awful. And it was just like, they were so hard to understand. And I was talking to another teacher and she said, you could read them? And I said, yeah. And then she said, well, then he was doing a really good job because they're not always even legible. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll give it to him.
I still can't read anything my son
Oh,
writes.
it was so funny.
And he's 18.
I was like,
That makes you feel any better.
apparently Jason was a terrible English teacher because these are just crazy.
So when you initially emailed us, you were saying something about how maybe you needed a widow wife as well. And like we talked about at the beginning of this episode, we have the Widow Wives Club, which thanks to you, we started. But you need your very own widow wife. So I think that you need like a profile, like a widow dating profile. You guys, Karen is amazing. She has a place in Puerto Vallarta and in Canada. And a wine store.
I have a wine store. Like, who doesn't? Yes, exactly.
There you go.
So, widow wife, wherever you are, I'll bring the wine.
You could also, if people in the Widow Wives Club just need some, wine suggestions, they can ask for those too. And you could be our resident widow wine expert.
Yeah.
I can do that for you.
So maybe if anyone needs a widow vacation, go to visit Karen.
I wouldn't recommend going to widow.
Karen, stop! I'm trying to promote you. Sell yourself. Yeah.
And go to the wine store in your neighborhood and pick something out.
Karen, is there anything else you need to tell us? I feel like that's kind of like a confession. Like, is there anything else?
Are you pregnant?
That would go arm in arm with the soap opera that we were trying to set up that Karen ruined by fixing the death certificate.
Did I mention I'm 50? I don't know if you guys caught that part. No, I'm not
been weirder things.
You never know. Yeah.
Let us know if it happens.
Yeah, I can. No, that's no. But I was visiting someone recently, a friend of mine, and we were just like, with the pandemic here, like where I live, we don't have a lot of cases here. Like we have 7 active cases in the entire province of like over 1 million people, and there's hardly anyone's died. And so we've got things have opened up again, like almost everything's back open, even restaurants are open. They've got limited capacity and there's like rules and stuff, but life is starting to get a little bit back to normal. And I was visiting a friend who had just been through a nasty surgery, and I went to visit him on his deck, and we're just having a glass of wine. And the biggest challenge I've been having, I wouldn't say the biggest, one of the ones right now, is that I just look ahead and I just like, I don't know what my life is. I'm just like, it's this, and having kids that are going to be gone soon. And I'm super proud of them because they are becoming independent, and, you don't want dependent, I don't want them living with me when they're 30, so it's like, this is a good thing that they've got their own lives, and, that's what you want for your kids. But I just sit here and go, well, what's next? Yeah. Like, I just have no idea. And this is the first time someone's done this to me. I know you guys have alluded to this before. It's like, Karen, you're such a good catch. And I was like, I'm not interested. It's just like, anyone would marry you. And I'm like, I don't want to marry anyone else.
She only needs a widow wife.
Yes, exactly.
Non-committal, non-touching.
Exactly.
Widow wife.
It is
no financial responsibility.
You're touching on something, though, that I think a lot of people feel, and that is a loss of a sense of purpose. I think that happens especially for people who have a longer death process, like a cancer or a ALS, where you're their caretaker, or you're
and a longer marriage too.
Yeah. Oh, and like Tico, his health wasn't really great, so you probably had some role in, kind of helping him in caretaking and doctor's appointments and things like that.
It was what I worried about for the last several years. I mean, it was like worrying about him and my kids, and that was my, that was my focus in life.
So now you've lost that, and you're kind of on the cusp of losing your job as a full-time mom to your kids too, because they're going to be adults and take care of themselves and move out and stuff.
They still need emotional support, but I'm kind of grumpy, so I'm not the best at providing it right now.
I understand that. Yeah.
I have trouble with the grumpiness. I have trouble with being just, things pissing me off and just being grumpy. And then, I'll be visiting someone, and then I'm like, why do they want to hang out with me? I'm like,
I'm such a downer.
I'm Debbie Downer. So seriously, like, I'm just like, oh God, here comes Karen.
Here comes Karen.
She better bring some wine, because otherwise I don't want to put up with this.
Maybe that's why they invited you. Oh, it's a good thing you have that.
Good thing I have wine, because I'm kind of grumpy.
That's so funny. Karen, you need to know that Canada is behind in the contest.
Well, I know, because I haven't.
Because yours hasn't been on yet, so that's kind of not fair.
It hasn't been on yet, and when it's on, I'm going to send it to people.
Okay, just know that you guys are coming from behind, so you've got a lot of work to make up. And we changed the rules mid-contest. Yeah, I know, because we didn't know how we were going to keep track of who was ahead, and so you have to have them leave a comment or a review with the name of their country so that we can keep track. Or an email.
That is way harder.
It is.
Or an email to us.
That is way harder.
That's going
to... She's like, I'm out. Canada's done.
I know. She's like, just don't post my episode.
We only have like 35 million people in Canada,
It's true.
You're going to do it like on a per capita basis, maybe.
Okay. But just...
That sounds like math. I'm out.
Now Mel's out. I'm out.
I'm okay with not winning. I'll be fine. Don't worry.
I mean, do you really want Anita playing your national anthem? Do you really want to win? Probably not.
It's not that important to me, I confess.
That's why Canada
I'd rather listen to you.
Lagging.
You play something interesting, Mel.
I'm going to play the United States.
How about an anthem medley, all 3 of them? You could do a mashup.
There we go.
But this is really, I really don't play the clarinet, at all. So.
I know, that's why I think it's funny.
Listen, I will make up for any of Anita's flaws with her clarinet.
Thank you for talking to us.
Again.
And telling us your story. It was fun to talk to you again. And your story is crazy, and I am not jealous of the whole Mexico debacle, but it does make a good story. And my motto in life is if it makes a good story, then it's worthwhile. So someday, well, even now you're laughing about it, even though it was probably like awful at the time, but it does make a good story.
And the not sleeping, makes it all really, really tricky.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the first piece of advice for anybody who's newly widowed is get some drugs to sleep. Amen. Because that's rough.
Yeah, see, I didn't listen to that advice, and that was not super smart. No.
You didn't listen to that advice?
No, I didn't.
Oh. You didn't know yet, but
people gave it to me, and I'm like, I've never taken a sleeping pill before in my life, and I'm like, is that gonna like knock me out so that I'm out of it? I don't want to be out of it. And
yeah.
But I was pretty stupid.
Yeah. But it's okay.
Took melatonin.
Yeah, that helps you to fall asleep, but it doesn't help you to stay asleep.
That was the problem. I didn't have any problem falling asleep. I'd fall asleep because I was exhausted, and then I'd wake up and then later, and you're like,
and be like, my husband just died. What is my life? Yeah.
Thanks for listening, and we are so happy to have chatted with Karen again. She's super fun. She needs a widow wife, so get on our Widow Wives Facebook group. Submit your information. We will approve you if you are not a scammer. And you can be in the running for Karen's widow wife. Don't forget to rate us. 5 stars would be great. If you want to give us 1 star, that's fine too. We'll just make fun of you. And leave us a review because it helps us with people finding our podcast. And we would love to share everybody's stories to as many people as we can. Thanks for listening. I'm Mel.
I'm Anita.
I'm Karen.
And we're just 3 youngish widows trying to figure out widow we do
now. We were almost in sync. Almost.
This is my favorite thing to discuss with you.
Tell me, what is it?
One of my favorite things. I do enjoy tacos and cheese and dogs. This is about how you cannot pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a phone plan, especially when you're a widow, your person is dead, you might have kids, you might need another option, and you just want your phone to work, you want unlimited texting and service, and you want it to be like $25 a month.
It blows my mind that they have plans that start at $15 a month. That is so cheap. And the cool thing is it uses other 5G networks, and so you don't have to pay extra for that, and you still get great service.
Yep. Anita and I have traveled all over, and I have used my phone. So I highly recommend it. And my mom's even on it. When my dad died, we put his phone down to the cheapest plan, which is $15 a month. And I think my mom's on the $20 a month plan, and it's so worth it. It's so much cheaper than what we were all paying before. So I highly recommend it if you're on a budget or not. Who cares? Ryan Reynolds is in charge of the company, and they send you free stickers with Ryan Reynolds temporary tattoos. It's kind of the best. So if somebody wants to sign up, what can they do, Anita?
Go to trymintmobile.com/WWDN. Seriously, you guys. Such a great idea. Save yourself some money.
And if you're worried about losing data or having any changes with your phone, not going to happen. They walk you through it. Everything's fine. It's the easiest process of all time. Again, that's
trymintmobile.com/WWDN.